Iceland. The land of fire and ice, where myths and reality intertwine in an endless dance. 5 friends decided to spend their weekend here. They met at university, and although they now worked in different corners of the world, their strong friendship remained unchanged. Anna, Wilhelm, Ellie, Thor, and Sophia always sought adventure. When Ellie stumbled upon an advertisement for a room of fear in one of Iceland's remote villages, they immediately agreed. The Room of Fear was a tourist attraction created by a local entrepreneur. It promised guests the most terrifying experiences and puzzles that not everyone could solve. "Only one will survive" was their slogan. The friends took it as a challenge and couldn't wait for the trial. They arrived at the village in the evening, as twilight was already enveloping everything around. The owner of the Room of Fear, a tall man with a sharp gaze and a silent smile, greeted them and explained the rules. Each of them would receive a flashlight and a key to their room. They had to go through a series of trials that would test their courage, wit, and endurance. Only one could survive. The friends entered the house where the first room awaited them. The door closed behind them, and a voice from the darkness explained the first task. Find your way through the labyrinth, where each turn could be your last. But remember, the most terrifying thing hides within yourselves. The flashlights cut through the darkness as they moved into the labyrinth. Anna led confidently, illuminating the path. Wilhelm and Thor stayed close together, relying on their logical thinking skills. Sophia and Ellie followed behind, discussing possible clues. For the first few minutes, the labyrinth seemed simple, but soon they realized that each turn became increasingly complex. The walls began to move, changing the labyrinth's configuration. Voices from the floor's depths whispered their names, making them turn and waste time on empty corridors. Thor, the calmest of them all, suddenly stopped. He heard something behind the wall. A sudden screech of metal and a dragging sound. He remembered the stories about the old house and its missing residents. Maybe it was just part of the game, but his heart beat faster. "Thor, what's wrong?" Sophia asked, noticing his anxiety. "I heard something strange. Could be a trap." "We're all in a trap," she smiled, trying to calm herself more than him. They moved on, but each of them now felt an invisible presence. Anna led the group, but even she began to doubt her choice of path. Her confidence wavered when she saw something that looked like a human silhouette at the end of the corridor. But as they approached, the silhouette vanished. At the end of the labyrinth, they were met with a new room. It was filled with mirrors that reflected their own fears. The friends couldn't avoid the reflections, showing their deepest fears and anxieties. Ellie saw herself old and lonely. Wilhelm saw his death in a fire, symbolizing his fear of flames. Anna saw herself trapped in a narrow space with walls closing in. In this room, real panic began. The mirrors distorted space and time, making them lose their sense of reality. Thor tried to stay calm, but even his steadfastness began to crack. They had to find a key to move to the next room, but every move was reflected and confused them. Sophia, always the most rational, realized they needed to unite their efforts. She remembered an old legend about elves who could move between mirrors. She suggested they stand back to back and move together. When they did this, the room suddenly seemed less threatening. They saw a small hole in the floor that led them to the next trial. The next room was cold and dark, filled with strange symbols on the walls. Anna approached closer to examine them. They were ancient runes that told a story about Vikings who brought a curse to this place. Thor, always fascinated by history, began deciphering them. He discovered that the curse could be lifted by making a sacrifice, but it wasn't clear what exactly needed to be sacrificed. As they stood contemplating, the floor began to move. The tiles under their feet started to shift, revealing an abyss. They realized they were running out of time. Ellie, always the most emotional, started to panic. She felt the walls closing in and the cold penetrating her bones. She began running, ignoring the others, and suddenly fell into one of the chasms. Everyone was in shock. Losing one of their friends shattered their fighting spirit. Wilhelm tried to keep the group together, but now each of them understood this was not just a game. The next room was even scarier. It was filled with darkness, with only faint lamplight indicating the walls. The friends began moving along the perimeter, searching for an exit. But the darkness was not just the absence of light, it had its own life. They heard whispers coming from the depths of the darkness. Anna fell to her knees when her flashlight broke. She felt cold hands touching her shoulders. She screamed, but the sound was muffled by the darkness. Her fear of confined spaces became more real. Suddenly, she saw a key, but it was a trap. When she reached for it, the darkness engulfed her. Wilhelm, Thor, and Sophia were the last ones standing. They understood that leaving their friends behind was a hard decision, but they had no choice. They had to find a way out and finish the game. The final room was the scariest. It was filled with bones and old belongings of those who couldn't pass the trials. Voices of past participants whispered in their ears that they were doomed. Thor found an old manuscript explaining the final task. They needed to find the heart of the room and destroy it to lift the curse. They began searching cautiously, examining every corner. Suddenly, Sophia saw something that looked like a crystal heart pulsing with light. She ran to it, but before she could touch it, her hands went through it, and she fell to the floor, losing consciousness. Thor realized it was an illusion. He found the real heart hidden in a dark corner of the room. When he took it out, the room began to collapse. He smashed the crystal heart on the floor, and the sinister light disappeared. When they emerged outside, they realized that only one survived: Thor. He stood in the cold Icelandic wind, surrounded by the remnants of the house, now just ruins. He felt the darkness slowly leaving his heart, but the memories of his friends and their deaths would stay with him forever. He understood that the scariest thing in the room of fear was not what hid in the darkness, but what they lost trying to survive. Thor returned to his friends to pay them tribute, knowing they had become part of this terrifying place forever.